and thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about 1408. It is a story by Stephen King, published in 1999, and I am comparing it with the movie adaptation from 2007, directed by Michael Hafstrom. And this is the story of writer Mike Enslin, who writes stories about his experiences in haunted locations, and even though he writes about ghosts and haunted locations, he himself is a cynic who believes in nothing. However, his stay in the haunted room 1408 at the Dolphin Hotel will lead him to change some of his beliefs. And of course, I am wearing my Overlook Hotel sweater, the Overlook Hotel being the haunted hotel from The Shining, which of course is also by Stephen King, and I do have a book versus movie for The Shining, so I will link to that in case you want more King content after this video is over. And so on to the book review. So this is a short story, and Stephen King actually began writing this story to use as an example, like a writing example for his book on writing, but then he found the story so compelling that he wrote it into a full short story. And it was initially released in 1999 in the short story collection Blood and Smoke, and then it was released yet again for the short story collection Everything's Eventual. And I listened to the audiobook for this one, and it was only 2 hours long, so a very short story, and Stephen King himself narrates it, which I'm always kind of hesitant when it comes to writers reading their own books, but he did a great job, so no complaints there. And the story itself, yeah, I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it is just very creepy and unsettling and weird and just everything I wanted going into it. And the story begins with the hotel manager talking to Mike, trying to dissuade him from staying in the room and just telling him why he shouldn't stay here. And yeah, it was just such a great way to build the tension and build the anxiety into being oh my gosh, what's going to happen when Mike stays in? So yeah, a great way to build the tension leading up to Mike getting in the room himself. And yeah, whenever I take a break from King, because the last one I covered, I think, was The Mist, and I covered The Mist and Shawshank Redemption around the same time, and that was 6 months ago now. So whenever I take a break from his books, it's always nice to return, you just know you're in good hands and a great storyteller, and you're going to be entertained, if nothing else. A lot of Stephen King books have affected me deeply, but even if it's not one that impacts me in a deep way, I know at least I'm gonna get a great entertaining story. And then on to the movie review. So I have seen this movie before. I watched it back in 2010, and even though that was 13 years ago now, and I had never seen it since, I still remembered so much of this movie because, yeah, it was very effective and very memorable. John Cusack, it basically rests on his shoulders because he plays Mike, and Samuel L. Jackson plays the hotel manager, Olin, and he is in a chunk of it, but, it's really on John Cusack, this whole movie. And yeah, I thought he was great. And again, this movie does a great job at building up the suspense even before Mike gets into the room. And then once he is in the room, the story is so simple, and yet, yeah, it's just so creepy, so effective, so unsettling. And the movie does add a bit more depth and a more backstory to Mike, which we will get into. But yeah, I thought it was really well done, and I really enjoyed it, and it's great for the Halloween season. And now from here on out, I will be getting into the details of the plot, which means I will have spoilers for both the book and the movie. So getting into Mike himself. So in the book, we find out that he and his wife are divorced, but that they're on amicable terms, and we really don't hear too much about her. And that is a big change from the movie, because in the movie, he and his wife are not divorced, and we find out that he just up and left her without, saying anything, and they're not divorced even though they don't live together. But the reason he left her was because they had a daughter who passed away, and once his daughter passed away, he just couldn't bear the grief and the pain. And when he looked at his wife, it reminded him of his daughter, and so he just up and left one day without even saying anything to her. And so yeah, so they're separated and are in a difficult place with their relationship. And Mike confronting his grief is a big part of the movie, and the emotions he goes through when he's in 1408 mirror the emotions you go through when you're dealing with grief, the 5 stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And in both, like I said, Mike is a cynical, skeptical person who does not believe in anything. And in the book, we don't really get a backstory on this. We just hear that he doesn't believe in anything. Whereas in the movie, we see more to this because when their daughter was on her deathbed, the mom was telling her telling her about heaven essentially and life after death. But then once the daughter dies, Mike is mad at his wife for telling the daughter these quote unquote lies, being you filled her head with these silly stories about how, it was okay to die because she was just gonna, go on to the next stage of life when, we should have encouraged her to fight more. She could have lived, but, we didn't encourage her to fight enough, and you were filling her head with these silly stories. And so that's part of the reason why he is just so angry and so cynical and just doesn't believe in anything. And in both, it seems Mike kind of feels like a hack to some extent with the books he writes, which he has a series of 10 nights in 10 haunted hotels or 10 nights in 10 haunted graveyards. And that's just kind of the series he's doing. And he is currently working on the 10 nights in 10 haunted hotels when he stays at 1408. But there's a part in the movie, exclusive to the movie, where he's at a book signing and a girl comes up and she has like an older book of his called like The Long Road or something. And this one is actually like a real genuine story that he wrote. And it is a fictionalized story about a man and the relationship with his father. And it clearly like is a fictionalized version of his own relationship with his father. But when the woman is getting this sign, she asks like, oh, is it based in any truth? And clearly it is. But Mike, again, he's just not wanting to confront his painful past or like the painful truths of his life. And so he lies and he's like, nope, not based on anything. But there's a great line in the book when he is meeting with Olin, and Olin has some of his books. And so he's like holding, these different books that Mike has written. And in the book we read, as always, when he saw his books in someone else's hands, Mike Enslin felt the oddest mix of emotions: pride, unease, amusement, defiance, and shame. He had no business feeling ashamed of them. They had kept him nicely over the last 5 years. And then later Olin can kind of see he's uncomfortable and he says, "You're sensitive about these, aren't you?" Olin asked. And this actually makes me think of a part in his memoir on writing, Stephen King's memoir, as well as just like a theme that comes up in multiple works of his where like feeling ashamed about what he writes, and also like other authors and readers making him feel like because he writes horror novels, like it's a lower tier than if he were to write some other kind of genre. And specifically in his memoir, he talks about how like when he was a teenager, he would write scary stories and then he sold them to his classmates. And at one point, a teacher got a hold of one and she read it and she took him aside and she was like, you're so talented. Like, why don't you use your talent to write something worthwhile? Like, don't waste it on scary stories. And so clearly that like impacted him, because it seems like he does struggle with being a horror writer and like being pigeonholed in that genre. And the way other people might view his works is being lesser than something else, which is totally not fair though, because any Stephen King fan will agree that Stephen King, like, yeah, he writes horror, but his books have so much depth to them. And the horror elements, like it represents like something bigger and deeper and more human and like more universally human. And so I think that's why people love his books. Like, yeah, they're scary and they get, your blood rising, but it's that deeper, like I said, like more human aspect to his books, which is why I think most of his fans love his writing. And then to move on to the Dolphin Hotel, which is where 1408 is at, and on to Olin, the hotel manager. So the movie is great because it starts out with Mike checking into a different hotel without claims to have a ghost. And when he gets there, they're like talking his ear off about the ghost and different claims people have made and, going on and on about it. And they're giving him a brochure like, oh, we talk all about it in our brochure, like read all about it. And they're really pushing this story. And so it's great because then when he goes to the Dolphin Hotel, Olin is the opposite. Like he does not want Mike to stay there. He has not been promoting this haunted hotel room or this evil hotel room. And so it's just the total opposite. And so we can see that Olin is more genuine, right? Because other people use the hauntings and the scary stories as a way to make more money, like they're trying to profit off of that. Whereas Olin is the opposite. He's not trying to profit off of it. He does not want Mike staying there. He doesn't care about any fame or notoriety being written about in Mike's books. Like he is not interested and he does not want Mike staying there. And he even has a hard time booking the room because Olin just keeps saying it's unavailable. And in the movie, we see this happening like in real time, whereas in the book, he's at the Dolphin Hotel and he's reflecting back about how like they were able to get the room because, they had the publishing lawyer use legal jargon and talk about civil rights and whatever, and how Olin can't discriminate and not let Mike stay there. And so, yeah, yet again, just how difficult it was for him to even be able to get to stay in this hotel room opposed to all the other places that are like begging him to come stay. And also in the movie, the reason he finds out about 1408 is because he has a P.O. box where he receives, fan mail and whatever. And someone sends him a postcard from the Dolphin Hotel mentioning 1408, and that is how he finds out about it. And then he researches it and sees, all the deaths that have occurred. Whereas in the book, that's not the case. He just was like researching and came across it in his research. And so I am curious, as far as the movie goes, who do you think sent Mike that postcard? Was it I don't think it would be Olin. That doesn't make any sense. So yeah, share your theories down in the comments. Who sent the anonymous postcard? And then, yeah, in both book and movie, once he arrives to the Dolphin Hotel to check in, Olin takes him into his private office and he tries to bribe him and tries to just scare him and convince him not to stay in 1408. And like I said, this is such a great scene in both book and movie, and it just builds that tension and like builds the excitement of being like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen when Mike gets in there after hearing all these crazy stories. And so, yeah, just such a great scene in both. But one difference with this between the book and movie is that the movie, like the details of the 1408's past and what has happened to people there, the movie kind of takes things a bit further and makes the details a bit more gruesome than they had been in the book. And then eventually Mike, he tells Olin that he will not be deterred and he is staying in 1408. And I think this is for sure in the book, and I think it might be the movie too, where Olin tells him, like, he can tell that Mike is a skeptic who believes in nothing. And he's like, that might have helped you in your past stays, but here, your lack of belief is just going to make you even more susceptible to room 1408. But Mike is just like, whatever, just give me the key, I want to get in there. And in the book, when he first shows up to the door is kind of crooked. And so he has his tape recorder and he's about to record talking about the crooked door, but then when he looks at it again, it suddenly is normal. And so right off the bat, he's just like, okay, that was weird. And in the movie, things don't get weird right away, but in both, it happens pretty quickly. And in the book, he specifically talks about how being in the room makes him feel like he's on drugs and hallucinating, and things are just so weird. And I thought the movie also conveyed this weird drug kind of feeling when he's in this room. And in the movie, the thermostat is broken, and so it's getting crazy hot in the room. And so he calls up the front desk being like, it's burning up here. Can you send someone to fix this? And they do send someone to fix it, but the guy, he's not willing to walk in the room though. So he just stands in the doorway and tells Mike what to do, and he is able to fix the thermostat. And this whole thing was not in the book. And yeah, a large chunk of this story is just all of the creepy, weird things that happen while he is in 1408. And then, like I said, in the movie, a big part too, when he's in the room, is him having to confront his past, specifically with his daughter, and then him abandoning his wife. And so that is also just a big part of what's going on. And also in the movie, exclusive to the movie, he calls up his wife on his laptop using a video chat. And at first she's just kind of like, what are you doing calling me? I haven't heard from you in however long. You just abandoned me. But eventually he is able to get her to realize that he is in trouble and he needs her help, and he tells her where he's at. And then from there though, he's trying to talk to her, but then the computer takes over, and we can see, when you're doing a video chat, you see the smaller version of yourself in the screen. And suddenly that smaller version is saying things that Mike isn't saying. And he's being like, no, what's going on? But she can't hear him. She just hears the fake version in the computer. And then the fake version winks at him, which I thought was funny. But yeah, that was not in the book. And then to talk exclusively about the movie for a bit. So there is a point when he escapes the hotel room. He wakes up in a hospital. His wife is there. And then he's just living life being like, wow, I can't believe I'm here right now. I can't believe I got out. And he keeps seeing people, ghosts that he had seen in the room. He sees them out and about in real life, having these hallucinations still. And then eventually he's at the post office, and then the post office just kind of deteriorates and it turns into 1408. And we realize that him thinking he got out was a whole hallucination, and he is still in there. So while editing this video, I realized there are a few things I got wrong. So editing Laura will be popping in here to make some adjustments. Starting with this part right here, I said that we think he escapes the room, but actually in this part when he thinks he has escaped, he wakes up on the beach, which was a scene from earlier. So really, he didn't escape the room. He realizes it was all just a dream he had. But then, of course, we see that it wasn't a dream he had and that it was all a hallucination from the room. So I initially phrased it it's a fake escape, but really it's one of those scenes where it's oh, it was all a dream. And then we realize it wasn't a dream, it was a hallucination, and he is back in the room. And then once he realizes he's still in there again, he is like, you know what? He has this line where he says, I've lived the life of a selfish man, but I don't need to die as one. And so he decides to light the place on fire. So with all of the movie endings, I had said that he lights the room on fire and then he sees the ghost of his daughter. But it's actually reverse, where he sees the ghost of his daughter first and then he decides to light the room on fire. I think it's while it's on fire, he sees the ghost of his daughter, and the daughter is like, oh, I love you, daddy, I miss you, I wish we could just be together forever. And he's hugging her, being like, oh, I wish we could too. And then there's multiple endings. So one ending, after he's with his daughter, he is then rescued from the hotel. He wakes up in a hospital, and this time it's for real, and he really did get out. And his wife is there, and they have like rekindled their relationship. And then later they're back at their apartment, and he has his stuff from the hotel, and he takes his tape recorder, which he had been, recording in both book and movie using that. And in the movie, he plays it, and it goes to the part where his daughter's ghost had shown up, and he can hear the daughter talking on the tape recorder, and the wife hears it too, and she's like shocked. And so that's how the movie ends in this version. But then there's another version that's like the exact same, except the wife doesn't hear the daughter. I guess just Mike hears her, but the wife is like, I don't hear anything. And then there is a third version. So by the way, the one where they both hear her talking on the tape recorder, that was the theatrical release. But then another version is where, we have the whole stuff happening with the fire and his daughter. But then from there, he dies. He dies in the hotel fire. But Olin, which in the version where he survives, we get a scene where Olin is like, good job, Mike, because he destroyed 1408. But then in this other version, Mike dies and he's being buried beside his daughter. And Olin shows up to the funeral, and he has like the tape recorder and other things that Mike had in the room, and he's trying to give it to the wife, but she's like, I don't want it. And he's trying to tell her too, be like, Mike died a hero, because that room, no one will stay there again. So, he saved so many people by burning that room, and he didn't die in vain. And then from there, he goes into his car, and then he thinks he sees like the ghost of Mike all burnt up in his back seat. But then when he looks again, there's nothing. And with this ending, I wanted to say something else, because I said it makes it seem like he's not resting in peace if he's in the back of Olin's car. But I forgot to mention that Olin sees a girl in the cemetery looking for her father, and then her father finds her, and they go walking off hand in hand, which when I saw this, I thought it was just a random father and daughter, but I guess it was supposed to be Mike and his daughter. And then also at the end of that ending, we see Mike in 1408, but then his daughter calls his name, and as a ghost, he like floats through the front door and leaves 1408. So even though he dies in this version, it is a happy ending, because it implies that even though he died, he did, his spirit did escape 1408, and he is with his daughter again. And then I wanted to mention more endings that I didn't realize until afterwards. So there's another ending where Mike dies, and then his publisher gets his manuscript, because even though he died in 1408, he wrote about it, and his publisher gets the manuscript, and at the end of the manuscript is a quote that his dad had said when he hallucinated seeing his dad in 1408. And like I said, he and his dad had a difficult relationship, and his dad had said something like, "As I am now, you will also be," or something. And that's what the manuscript ends with, that quote. So this is like the saddest of all the alternate endings, because he dies. And then ending with that quote makes it seem like his spirit isn't resting in peace, and that he never really does escape 1408, even in death. So yeah, there are a lot of endings. Maybe there's even more, because like I said, that last one I didn't even realize existed until after I had recorded this video. But anyway, back to the rest of this video. But then the book ending is a bit different, where once again, he does start a fire as a way to escape 1408 one way or another. And so he starts a fire in the room. And then there is a sewing machine salesman on the same floor. And this, things come full circle, because a sewing machine salesman was the first person to stay in 1408 who ended up dying. And then now, decades later, another sewing machine salesman is there on the same floor, and he smells the smoke and stuff. And so he rescues Mike, and then Mike survives. Although there's a line in the book where Olin tells him even the survivors never escape 1408, meaning that they are just forever haunted by that experience, both mentally and physically, because Mike, he does have physical health issues now due to his stay, but also just the trauma from it, because the room will get this golden yellow. And so now he hates sunsets, and when the sun is setting and that golden light is shining in, he closes all of his curtains. And he also doesn't have a phone anymore, because in 1408 the phone would ring and he would pick it up, and it would be this creepy operator voice. And so he doesn't want to have any phones around anymore. And yeah, that is how the book ends. And when it comes to which ending I like best as far as the movie goes, initially I thought I liked the version where he dies, which it's funny because Stephen King, his books often end with good defeating evil, right? And so we kind of get that in both movie endings as well. Although in the one where Olin sees him in the backseat, that almost implies is Mike not resting in peace, Or he was just freshly buried, so maybe he just hasn't officially moved on gone yet, but it doesn't mean he's not resting in peace. I feel like it could be interpreted different ways, but obviously the ending where he escapes and he and his wife hear her on the recorder, that is like the happiest of the endings. But yeah, initially I thought I liked the one where he died, but I do like the one where he lives too, and they both hear the recording. So it's kind of tough to say which version I prefer. So let me know down in the comments which ending you like best. But as far as book versus movie goes, I'm gonna have to say the movie wins here because it does delve deeper into the themes and we get more of a backstory with Mike. And again, I thought the performances were great and the movie was just very effective. There's a lot of jump scares, but I thought it was still well done and creepy and weird and unsettling, similar to the book. And yeah, I did like the book. The ending was like kind of underwhelming. Like, I don't know, him being rescued by the sewing machine salesman was some nice symmetry, but I just wasn't like loving the ending of the book. So in some ways, like regardless of which alternate ending I'm thinking of, I kind of prefer just the movie endings better, as well as just the movie overall just has a bit more substance to it. And yeah, that wraps it up for 1408. I think I talked about everything I wanted to. This was a bit of a shorter episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. So comment your thoughts down below if you have seen this movie, if you have read this short story. And yeah, this is a great movie to watch for the Halloween season. I would definitely recommend it. And yeah, I'm glad I was able to rewatch it because like I said, it had been over 10 years since I last watched this. So yeah, that was good to return to it. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you have not already. And then if you want more Stephen King content, I have covered a lot of Stephen King on this channel, but The Mist was another recent novella book versus movie I did. So I will link to that here on the screen if you would like to watch that one. And that's one where the book and movie have very different endings. I prefer the movie ending, but man, it's a crazy ending. If you have not seen that movie, like it's something. But anyway, so I will link to that book versus movie if you would like more King content, and then I will link to a couple others down in the description as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed my Halloween themed content this month. And yeah, I will see you next time. Bye.